ズバリプリキュアのパワーアップアイテムよ。
Darn it, I knew there were still holes in that fourth wall. We opened this week with the first opening buffer of the series, a little late on that, though that's also kind of a theme with this episode. Anyway, after running past the title, Manatsu introduced the show in her mouth. Okay, can't say I expected that. I mean, usually they just have miniature versions of themselves in there. Also, what the heck is that? Magical girls should not have uvulas. Speaking of happiness charge, we open with the Precure doing a little beach training with some clear establishment of power levels. Asuka, of course, had the best cardio, Manatsu being a close second, and Minori and Sango competing for last place. Apparently, this was also a part of the Tropical Club's ill-defined criteria.
That makes sense to me.
As they were taking a break, they found a washed-up seal who turned out to be the Mermaid Queen's pet and available on Amazon right now for the low price of only 3,982 yen. But yeah, Kurun was finally here, the supposed fairy mascot of the season with an actual speaking role, and all I can say to that is...
Well, it's about time you showed up.
I mean, really, after the healing animals, I have some pretty high standards when it comes to my mascots, and even then, we're on episode 7, and this incarnation of Umaru has contributed absolutely nothing to the show, so it's kind of hard to get excited. Not helped by the fact that she can only speak in Pokemon talk, which Laura tried to act like she understood. And for whatever reason, they decide to repeat that joke immediately after. Yeah, more on that later. For now, the spotlight character of this episode, no not her, Minori, used her intuition to surmise that the seal was hungry based off of the fact that she had likely swam a long distance from the Grand Ocean to the surface world. Thus, they fed her some shell cookies from Laura's fridge. Okay, don't know why you would keep cookies in a fridge, much less an underwater fridge, even though they've also established that cookies get soggy in water and—
The answer is don't think about it!
Yeah, whatever, I guess they just wanted to show off the play gimmick of this plushie. More importantly, Minori further established her major character trait by pointing out that Kurun likely got caught up in an intense ocean current around the mainland, while likely trying to deliver something from the Queen. Said item obviously wasn't in her possession, so the Precure decided to help look for it. This intel managed to catch Butler's ears, and thus the real big bad of the show at this point decided to dispatch Little Miss Shrimpmaid, who refused to do it because... Well then, I bet you would love working in politics. But yeah, I kind of got slight hints here that this crustacean was taking advantage of the fact that she was a literal shrimp, even though she was probably around the same age as all the other generals. In short, she was likely just an Iron Man / woman child, unfortunately one of the most common forms of procrastination these days. Still, the promise of some sort of reward got her off her tail, and the scene ended with Polnareff stealing a line from Jotaro. And yes, more JoJo references later, but first the Precure decided to look around the area they originally found Kurun at, while also theorizing what exactly she had lost. Well, to be fair, he is canon in the Precure universe, and if anything, he would probably end up working for the witch. But no, Laura had a much more meta-breaking theory in the form of the aforementioned power-up item, which they imagined as a canon. Okay, I know I kind of made that offhand Go Ranger reference last week, but is Toy Legit trying to extend Super Sentai's 45th anniversary into this show? I mean, as I've pointed out, Cure Summer and Zen Kaiser both use Big One's color scheme, and now they're outright using Jacker's Big Bomber. Then again, after reviewing his writing for PPGZ this week, I'm starting to think that Isao Murayama is just a big nerd for those old Showa Tokusatsu. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Anyway, while the rest of her team recollected the series that unfortunately was cut way too short, Minori explored the woods near the beach. Her reasoning for this would be quickly explained after she came back with the very item they were looking for. Yes, once again, she managed to correctly deduce that after it washed up on shore ahead of Kurun, a random passerby had found it and hung it on a visible place on a nearby branch. As for how she achieved such good deduction,
強いて言えば想像力。本を読んでいれば身につく。
could somebody tell Murayama this ain't Star Twinkle? Okay, but seriously, this does actually match up with Minori's bookworm characteristics. Very effectively expanding on a character who, while seemingly unsociable, also likely has an encyclopedic knowledge of common human behavior in order to properly write for fictional characters, which I'm sure a lot of the Precure writers try to do as long as they're not hampered down by gimmicks. I'll say right now, I'm glad to have Murayama back on board after he took most of 2020 off. I just wonder if he decided to talk about imagination again because he needs to work off that writer's rust. Anyway, Elda soon arrived looking to steal the item. She used a nearby seashell to create a monster of the week. Oof, I don't think even a slowpoke would want to be bitten by that version of Shelder. Also, I better not see any comments about the appendages on that thing. Laura correctly pointed out that it should have been weaker since there were no civilians nearby to steal motivation energy this week, but I guess they couldn't do 2 bad fights in a row, so this one actually went on for a decent length. During all of this, Laura and Elda had a little exchange.
ごめんなさいよ。
Oh, come on, you two, get along. I mean, I think we can all agree that both of you deserve more screen time in SAO. However, I guess Silica wanted to prove that she was best girl, so she unveiled the long-awaited power-up item move, which was...
You fight me with fruit? Don't mock me!
To be fair, that clip was funnier than Elda's bad pun. But yeah, the shrimp figured that she'd still get a reward by bringing back a fruit platter. She probably wouldn't, but at least she would still have the platter. However, after the Precure dealt with Shelder using Minori's rather clever binding strategy, they rescued Laura and her platter. Elda somewhat rightfully downplayed the item they spent all afternoon looking for, but Minori defended the Queen's gift, saying that it was clearly very important. Well, that and your fanfic is all about a pirate and mermaid trying to protect all of the fruit in the world, but I'm sure there's absolutely no bias there. Anyway, they defeated Shelder and enjoyed their very chewy and likely very salty platter of treats. During all of this, Kurun used a camera feature on the Aquapod that I somehow doubt the actual toys have a feature exactly like this, and she also decided to take up residence in what's supposed to be Laura's home, rightfully to the mermaid's objections. It's kind of like being forced to take care of a neighbor's cat who refuses to go home. But whatever, the episode ended with Laura bubble texting the Queen a group picture of the heroines of the show. This was a very Murayama script to say the least, which overall I think is a great thing when it comes to world and character building, not so much when it comes to comedy. Now some of that can be the fault of writer's rust, but some of the jokes in this episode do feel like they just went on a little bit too long. Oh yeah, and also Kurun debuted. Again, that's all I really can say about the character. Now, this is a very subjective matter, so please don't take my opinion on comedy as any sort of absolute. That said, I did feel like some of the comedy in this episode was awkwardly delivered. As I mentioned, stuff like Laura and Kurun's first interaction would have worked better if they had restricted it to just one exchange rather than trying to needlessly stretch it out by repeating the joke. The same could be said for a lot of the jokes in this episode, as, ironically, I'd say comedy is like makeup, less is more sometimes. Now that said, there were some good laughs here, like Elda's implied woman-child antics. It gave some good characterization to the new villainess, and it had me giggling with subtle commentary on the real-life Yaranedas of the world. In fact, while I think his comedy needs work, Murayama's character writing is still on point. Minori, even more so than last week's good outing, showed off her intuitiveness both on and off the battlefield by applying her bookworming where it was needed. She was the definite star of this episode, who deserved to have her name in the title rather than the new fairy, who again, I don't hate or anything, I just can't really see what she can add to this show, especially when she can't talk, and Laura has already done most of the work. This opinion could always change later, but for now, all I can say about the seal is... Still, this was overall a good return for Murayama, awkward jokes aside, with some good characterization from Minori and Elda, and a much better fight than last week's. Also, yes, I preferred the Big Bomber over whatever this Phoenix thing is, and you can't convince me otherwise. As many of you felt like pointing out, apparently Manatsu's VA, Ai Firezu, has achieved her childhood dream of starring in a JoJo anime by being cast in the upcoming Stone Ocean arc as Jolene Kujo. All I can really say is, good for her, though it is also a little surprising since Jolene already had a VA previously in the video games with Miyuki Sawashiro, ironically another Precure VA who I will be talking about in one of my upcoming videos. And if you happen to follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I did a little custom paint job earlier this week. One more thing I'm a little surprised by is that Firezu is currently playing a Yangi NPC who's trying to kill the main character of another show alongside her role as a Precure. Hey, you wanna hear what her aura might sound like? Yeah, Full Dive is one of my highest recommendations for the season. It is an isekai, but it also has a few interesting twists to it. It has Kira trying to kill Deku. Just let that sink in. Anyway, until next time though, for now my friends, and you know what? Can we actually see a few more clips of Full Dive alongside Manatsu? Aren't dichotomies fun?